Welcome back to the IT Fundamentals Training Series. This is episode 16, and we're going to talk about power today, power supplies. Join me as we get rolling with power supplies. Welcome back to the IT Fundamentals Training Series. I am your host, Mark Haupt, and today we're going to talk about power supplies in episode 16. And if you're following along in the books, we're looking at page 48 through 52. And there's a few things I want you to make sure that you're aware of that's in this book that will come through on the test that you need to be prepared for. So first of all, we talk about power supplies, but you need to know the term power supply unit, or PSU, power supply unit. That is the term that's used. So when we're talking about power supply units, it's multiple different types of power supplies, because you're probably familiar with the power supplies that you might use with a laptop, where it's a little brick that sits off to the side that you plug into your laptop and goes then into the wall. That's a visible power supply unit. And then there's inside desktops and tower type of units, or even inside servers. Those bricks now move internally into the computer. In fact, if you look at figure 1.31, you'll see there in that picture a power supply unit that sits inside a desktop or a large computer type of environment. Now, let's take a quick step back and let's just understand that power supplies and what they do, and why would we need a power supply with a computer? Why can't we just take a cord, plug it into the wall, and plug it straight into the computer? And here's why: is because most motherboards, in fact, all motherboards that I'm aware of, need to have the power transferred from an alternate current or an AC type of environment into a direct current or DC type of environment. In addition to that, the power supplies will step down the actual power that goes to these units. So most of your motherboards only need about 12 volts DC power, or direct current power, that comes to them. And most in the US, at least, most wall jacks will send 110 or 120 volts power, alternate current, into the power supply. So this power supply acts as a proxy between what's coming out of the wall and coming into your home from the power company and what you need in order to operate at the computer level. Now, the book does not get into why you need to translate the current from AC to DC and things like that. And therefore, I'm not going to get into that, because we'll probably get into that kind of thing in our A+ training at a later point. Right now, we're trying to get you the IT fundamentals ingrained into your system. So let's just know that there has to be a translation between the alternate current and direct current. Now, what I will give you as bonus material, if you will, is what AC versus DC is. So if you think of it this way, as AC and DC as roadways, your AC is a road that you can go both ways on. You may travel, from one city to another, and that road has people coming at you as you're going in the opposite direction. So AC has that ability to reverse path, if you will. Whereas direct current is a one-way road. It has one direction in, doesn't have the reverse path, nothing comes back out. And so that's one level of what happens on these power units. The other one is where, as I talked about earlier, you step down a little bit from that 110, 120 down into the 12 volt type of environment. So that's important to understand about what these power supplies do. Now, there's a lot of different terms that we're using, and we already described. If you look at page 49 on the very top note, it talks about that the AC, DC, as far as the terminology is concerned. And that's really what you need to know here is two things about AC, DC. First of all, alternative current and direct current is what AC and DC means. It's not an Australian rock band that has some pretty decent songs from back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, or even currently. But so AC is alternate current, meaning two ways, back and forth, if you will. And direct current one-way road. So that's one thing. And then the second thing you need to be concerned about is the power coming in. Now, and the fact that it transforms. Those are the only two things that you need to know. Now, and those are both listed on page 49 underneath those notes. And so take a look at that. Now, one of the things that's important to understand about the power supplies that are offered on desktops and large tower type of units, even servers, is that these power supplies sit inside of the case. As you'll see in the figure 131 and 132 here, they have a portion of them that is facing external to the unit. That's where the black plug-in exists, and you'll see that there's a fan that's in there as well, because these power supplies, they do generate a lot of power. Even on a laptop, the little brick that sits on the outside, if you were to pick that up after many hours worth of it operating, being plugged straight into the wall, it is going to be hot to the touch. In fact, I've touched a few of them where I drop it. It's so hot, which those are probably the kinds that are getting a little dangerous. Now, you'll notice in figure 132 that underneath the little black section where you plug in your cord from the wall to the power supply, there's these two little dots, octagonal dots underneath there. On some power supplies, it's a switch, a red switch that you move back and forth. So these power supplies, what we have to understand is that in different countries in the world, the type or the voltage of the power that comes into the house and therefore goes into your appliances is different. So in the US, it's 110, 120, but if you go to Europe, you're talking 220, 240 over there. So that could cause some significant problems with your power supply and your computer, which could result in fires if that's not done correctly. Now, the only time that you need to take a look at that is whenever you move a computer, if you're moving from US to Europe, or when you first buy the computer, just make sure that setting a slide bar or that manual switch that's there is set to the power of the country or location that you're in. Again, US is 110, 120. That's where it should be set when you receive it out of the box, and unless somebody's made a mistake with it. So just verify it before you plug in, because you do not want to have any failures. Now, let's just take a look at the cord real quick. Again, 1.32, if you look at the black square or rectangle, it's not quite a square, because that would mean it has equal sides. So therefore, it is a rectangle. It doesn't have equal sides. But if you take a look at that, you'll see that there's three male prongs on the inside of that. So it's just like any other plug in your house. You'll have a positive and a negative, which are the two that are on the bottom in this picture. Or if you flip it upside down, it would be the two that are side by side. And then you have a third one, which is your grounding wire that sits on, kind of in a triangle. It would sit at the pinnacle or the top of that. So that's the purpose of those three wires. It's worth knowing that as well. All right, so if we move over to figure 133, you see there a 20-pin ATX connector, and then there's a couple of other connectors in 134. Now, if you recall back when we were talking about the motherboard, I talked about how they all have different, they kind of make them to the point where they have different like design, if you will. Inside, if you look at figure 133, this is best to just look at that. You'll see that there's a whole bunch of them that are literal squares, and then there's alternative designs, where some of the squares, for example, have corners that are cut off of them, and there's even one that appears to be a circle. That design on that connector that will plug in figure 133 is coming from the power supply and designed to be plugged into the motherboard. That is designed so you don't accidentally plug it in the wrong way. That is the purpose of that design. It's kind of mistake proof, if you will. We have some other terms for it as well, if we're just talking amongst each other. If you're in the IT world, you might call it idiot proof or dumb proof or things along those lines. But But really, it's designed so you can't make a mistake. And so there's only one way for it to be plugged in unless you take a hammer and jam it in. So keep that in mind when you're plugging in the power supply into the motherboard. You really can't do it wrong if you're doing it gently and doing it nice. So keep that in mind. That's an important piece. Now, on page 51, there's an important statement at the very top that I want you to pay attention to. And that's what I was just talking about a few moments ago about the outlets for the different types of countries. And the reason I want you to pay attention to that piece is not for what I've already told you, but the fact that you actually can cause a fire if you plug that in, like a 110 design system into a 220, because what you're doing is you're putting too much power into the system, more than it's willing to accept or understands. And that will then result in transference down to the motherboard, causing everything to get hot and potentially cause a fire. So that switch on the back that I talked about a few moments ago, again, this is just to reiterate to make sure that you have it set for your proper location. All right. Now, moving on to page 52, here's another important piece about power supplies. If a power supply goes bad, do not, and I repeat, do not try and open it up and repair it yourself. These power supplies run about $25 or $30, if that. Simply get the right one to replace it, and replace it as an entire box. Toss the other one. It's not worth the problems. It's not worth the possibility of you harming yourself physically, because one of the things you have to remember is these power supplies, because you're stepping down from 110, 120 into 12 volt, they actually retain some of the power, if you will, within them residually after they're unplugged for a short period of time. So you can shock yourself, including up to harming yourself, with these power supplies if you try and pull one out and do some sort of repairs on it. So just be careful with that. Make sure that you just go ahead and spend the extra 25, 30, maybe even up to $50 and replace your power supply. Now, the last thing on the power supply that I need to share with you is the fact that you do also need to make sure that you get the right power supply. So if you're buying a computer off the shelf, it will come with the right power supply, whether that's a laptop or a desktop. But if you add a GPU or some sort of PCIe card to your computer, you probably need to make sure that card will be able to accept the power that's coming from your system already. All right. So kind of do a little bit of a validation of that before you put the card into the system and perhaps overload it or cause other problems. So that's one important piece. But more likely is the situation than adding cards to the system. More likely is with a laptop, your power brick, as I call it, or power supply unit, will go bad, because those things are being wrapped. The cords are going to be wrapped up around them quite frequently as you are moving from one place to the other. The mobility, if you will, that you would expect with a laptop. And lots of times they become frayed, and they become like break at the edge of the power supply unit or that brick. And so you need to replace them from time to time when they become frayed like that. Make sure that you get one that's specific for your model of computer, not only to make sure that it will plug into your computer, but it's also transmitting or it's receiving and transmitting the right amount of power that needs to be converted inside of that power supply unit for your computer, so you don't fry it. So that's probably the biggest point where you will potentially have to deal with a replacement power supply unit, is with a laptop. So again, be careful with that. Make sure you get the right one. Make sure you match up the model number to model number from the power supply unit to your laptop. Now, the good thing is that if you need to replace those, I have found that most laptop power supply units can be replaced by simply going to Walmart and buying them there or at Best Buy. So if you're out and about, you're on vacation, you're out traveling for work, and your power supply unit for your laptop goes bad, you should be able to drop into any of those types of stores and pick up a unit that will suffice for your replacement, at least until you get home. But buying an OEM or original equipment manufacturer power supply unit is fairly important, but not required. So you can just buy one of those, like at a Walmart, like I said, off the shelf, and it will suffice for you. All right, there we are with power supplies. Remember, again, please hit the subscribe button, like us, give us the 5 stars, do all those fun little things that help us promote this a little better. Remember, our purpose here is not to be fancy. Our purpose is for information to be transmitted to you, to be given to you free of charge, for you to understand IT Fundamentals Plus. And with that said, anything you can do to help promote us and bring other people into this fold would be great. You can contact me with any questions or comments you have at mhoupt@commonsensesecurity.net. And I'd be happy to take your conversations and questions there. All right, the next time we're going to talk about cooling systems. And then we're going to wrap up this chapter here probably in episode 18, where we will talk about the practice exams that are coming up. Perhaps you might want to go start taking that 20-question practice exam and see where you're at with that. I know one individual has already taken that exam. Congratulations on that 95% that you got on that, JD. That's great. But let's see where everybody else is at. Let me know how you're doing on this. I want to hear from you. I want to know what kind of questions you have, how you're doing as you take these various practice exams, or the different kinds of modules where they're asking you to kind of walk through a few things. So let's hear back from you on that. Let me know that this is of value to you, and hopefully you'll have a good day, and we can talk tomorrow on episode 17. Thanks.